Welcome back to the podcast. I've just been chatting away with Paul. He actually sort of heard about this from a previous guest, Ollie. I've heard some fantastic stories already that had you involved in. Do you want to tell me a bit about yourself, and we can sort of talk about, I guess, the Channel Swim is where I'd like to start.
Sure. Well, Ollie's been a good friend for many years, and he explained in his podcast that we met through the O2E vehicle. O2E being the charity that we set up some 13 years ago now, 14 years ago actually, called Ordinary Extraordinary. So Ollie was kind enough to put his body through the works in the first year of our charity organisation. So that's really how I'd met Ollie, and then we've gone on to do a number of different challenges together and with like-minded team friends and colleagues and different things. So that's really how I met Ollie. And we can, as you say, we can sort of touch on that down the line. So I suppose really from my side, my sort of background has been pretty much rugby for most of my sort of teenage years and adult life, and then sort of carried on playing rugby up to injuries and everything else by sort of the mid-30s. But by the time I got to about 30 years of age or so, rugby was still a very big part of my life. I was also looking to try and challenge myself in different ways. And the team has always been, a real buzz and like to do things with other people. And I remember when I was really young, I might have been 4 or 5, and I said to my Irish uncle when I was staying in his place in Dungarvan in Waterford, that I said, Uncle, one day I'm going to swim the Channel. And as a 5-year-old, I didn't contemplate that, and he only reminded me of that some many years later. So there was obviously something in the back of the mind there that I just found that quite appealing and quite unique. To be fair, I must say I was never a swimmer at school. Certainly not in the swimming team or anything like that, but could swim and used to enjoy just mucking about. But the Channel always had this allure to me because I just found that quite an amazing experience. So cut a long story short, if I can, I got some school friends together really, and the way the Channel works, you can do the Channel as a solo, or you can do it in teams, and the teams can go really from to 2 people to 6 people. So I decided 6 is probably our best bet because we really weren't swimmers. So I got five friends, close friends together, and we all agreed after a few beers that the Channel would be a good thing to try and attempt the following year. So there's a regulation that you may have heard of called the Channel Swimming Association, very well organised, and you have to go through that Channel Swimming Association to even attempt to be, in those international waters. And bearing in mind that is the busiest shipping lane in the world, so it has to come with great safety and diligence that they put into that. So, cut a long story short, put a call out to one of these pilot boats, a guy called Mike Aldrin, excuse me. I said, we're looking to do this, and so we got ourselves a spot for the following year. And at that stage, as I said, none of us were really swimmers, and thought then now this is the time to try and rack up the swimming training and see where we go with this. So the way it works is, if you're a team of 6, you each swim for 1 hour each, and then the person behind you will dive off the support boat, swim past you, overtake you, and then you're good to go and get back onto the boat. So really you're swimming for an hour at a time, and you have a support boat which is near and hopefully close to you most of the time. So our training for this was a bit strange, because it was the cold water really was the problem, not necessarily the distance. So the distance to the Channel is about 25 miles, but by the time you go with the currents, that moves out to about 30 or 33 miles, depending on how slow you are, as we were in our case, really. So you've got to allow for anything up to maybe 3 hours of yourself swimming individually, depending on which order you're in that relay. So we started our cold water training, if you like, at the start of that winter. We used to go down to Tootingbeck Lido, actually, and that's the largest pool in Europe. And we'd swim laps of that and build ourselves up from 100 metres to 200 metres to a mile and so forth. And that was really the main core of our training. And then when the weather got a little bit warmer, or the sea got a bit warmer, we started our training down in Dover Harbour in about March or April. And we'd start off with, I think, half an hour is the most we could do at the beginning. and we tried to build it up to sort of an hour and a half swimming between the Hobber Port and the cross channel ferry port. So a little bit daunting in some stages, but that was where we did most of our training. And then what happens is, you've got a date that's thrown to you where you're on a neap tide, which should be where the sea's at its calmest. But then, of course, then you are open to the weather and the elements. So we got a phone call about 48 hours before our date, which I think was on the 4th of July from memory. 48 hours notice to say, look, I think the green light's on. Meet you down at Dover Harbour at 3 o'clock in the morning. All systems go. And that's really what we did. So we drove down there with real sort of interpretation, some nerves. And I remember getting towards Dover, and as you get to there on the motorway, you come across sort of quite a high plain, and you can just see the whole of the channel in front of you. And, I was thinking, my God, in a number of hours, we're going to be in the middle of that thing. And that was already then quite daunting. So that was the sort of first real nerves that kicked in. So anyway, you meet your pilot on the boat, and he talks you through the safety aspects and everything else. Then he spins you around to a little beach around the corner called Shakespeare Beach. And then your first swimmer dives off the boat, maybe sort of 100 metres off, swims to shore. The pilot gives a big go on his klaxon horn, and you're off, and the clock's ticking, really. So then the first swimmer's out there for an hour. Our first swimmer was John Elwell. He was a good swimmer, to be fair, and he made good, steady progress. And then you really rotate through your team. And the journey was very, very interesting, because probably for about the first 4 or 5 hours, we had perfect conditions, flat, calm seas, and we really, everyone was fully enjoying the experience. But as the experience went on, after maybe 4 or 5 hours, we could just start to see sort of the wind really pick up, white horses, appearing, and then suddenly things changed quite dramatically, actually. And really, from then on in, it became a real challenge to try and stay on course, to try and get this challenge finished and completed. The vast majority of people that do channel swims don't succeed, and that's not because we were great swimmers, but it's just you're just fighting the elements. And there's a hell of a lot of luck involved with that. Because we were a team of 6 as a relay, I think we were probably given a little bit more room than some of the others. I mean, the solo swimmer would have been pulled out before then, I'm very sure, because there was now big swells in the middle of the channel. I mean, you're talking 8-10 foot swells, very, very windy, getting rougher really by the hour. And without going into sort of too much detail, we swapped every hour, one after the other, and it was increasingly likely that we weren't going to finish this thing. But to be fair, we battled away, and the pilot gave us enough rope to be able to continue on the swim. And then eventually, at that stage, it was as we could then start to see France, which was that in itself was quite exciting. But you see it, but you just never get closer to it, because again the tides are pulling you around in all sorts of different directions. And you can never really swim against, the speed of a tide or the power of a tide. So you have to sort of go with it. So that again was very, very daunting. And sort of even just to maybe move back a couple of hours, when you're in the middle of that channel, you've got nothing else around you. You've got the comfort of a boat somewhere around you that you can't often see, because he might be on the bottom of a 10-foot swell and you're on the top of that, so you might not see or visualize him for some minutes. And again, quite daunting. You hear a lot of noise. Big tankers you'll hear in the distance, and you might be able to see them. They might be 1 or 2 miles away, but when you're a little speck in the sea, that's quite daunting. And then once you've gone over their path, you can notice that, because the water gets super cold, where they've sort of dredged up all the cold water from below. So some of those things were definitely, you're having to play mind games with yourself to try and keep yourself strong mentally for that 1 hour and get yourself through. But sort of then to fast forward, got ourselves there into the dark, could see the coastline. I think it was my turn left to go, and by this stage the pilot was very close to calling it a day, and he thought we might have about 45 minutes of swimming time left, depending on if we could actually finish that with the currents and the weather. So sure enough, in we went, and that last 45 minutes was super scary, because at that stage, the weather had changed and was changing dramatically by almost by the minute. And again, I couldn't see the boat at all for most of the time, because the swells now were probably 12 plus foot. The wind was huge. It was dark and pretty scary, really. But all I could do is every time I got to the top of a crest of a wave, I could just see the lights of Calais ahead. So you obviously know you're going in the right direction, and you can't fight the currents. You just go with it, and eventually, this big wave took me out and pretty much threw me up onto the beach. And then it all happened so quickly. And my God, 13 hours later, from setting off from Dover, Shakespeare Beach, we've arrived at Cap Grenade beach pretty much an empty beach. There was a couple of dog walkers, and they heard this sort of furore. They could see someone staggering out of the water, and they came running over, and they were quite concerned, of course. And then they could see a boat in the distance that was making all sorts of noise and pulling his horn and all sorts of stuff. And they were quite concerned. I couldn't speak French, so in my broken French, I was trying to explain we swam from England, and then suddenly it dawned on them that what had happened, and that was quite surreal actually. So again, really an amazing feeling of touchdown, but that was one of sort of safety relief, one of relief of getting the challenge done because it was very much unknown to us. And all sorts of emotions go through your head at that time. And then of course what I've got to do then, so I think I've got to be on the beach for 30 seconds or something, and then I've got to try and swim back out to the boat, jump on the boat, and he takes us home. But that wasn't that easy, because at this stage I couldn't swim back through the surf because it was just too rough. So I tried that for 5 or 10 minutes, and each time got spat back up onto the beach and thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to stay in France here. And one last push anyway, managed to get through the surf eventually. And after a long time getting back onto the boat, maybe another 15, 20 minutes, the boat couldn't see me because it was dark and all sorts. But anyway, got back onto the boat, celebrate with the teammates, and we were all pretty exhausted and looking forward to our journey home. And then, strangely enough, we hear over the radio, "Mayday, mayday, we're sinking, we're sinking." And there's a distress flare goes up in the air. And there's a fishing boat, that's sinking out in the middle of the channel, because at this stage we were probably up to force 4, force 5 gale, super dangerous. So the captain then, no more celebrations, everyone sit down. It's sort of the rule of the sea that if you see a flare, you've got to go and help, no matter who you are. So it made us all sit down, and he was full throttle ahead to this sinking fishing vessel, which by the time we got there had pretty much sunk. And luckily, as we arrived, the Coast Guards from Dover arrived from the other side, and obviously they did their job much better than we might have been able to do. So that was sort of quite a strange ending to the experience, really. We were very lucky that we finished the challenge. Had it been another half an hour, I don't think we would have finished it, to be very honest. We sort of paddled the way back to Dover, and that was the sort of the start of maybe a bit of a first adventure experience out of the rugby world, and something that was something to experience that with your teammates is something that's really just quite amazing. And it was a long time ago now, but I have such fond and vivid memories of that challenge, because it's almost like popping your cherry, isn't it? It's your sort of first one that you do, and that one does stick out as being something very special, Josh.
Well, it's amazing. It's very storybook ending. I've got this very surreal image of you rocking up onto the beach exhausted, and not being able to communicate that you've just swam from the other side.
And
I think it's brilliant.
You're all over the place anyway, emotionally, physically, and that's the last thing you have to start thinking about. And I say French is not something that comes naturally to me. So you're trying in your pidgin French to, I think nager is to swim. So je suis nager le channel, and something like that, however it went. And then the sort of the penny dropped. So it was, that was quite surreal actually, a bit funny. But again, the ending was so quick that it's not really how you plan it, because you sort of might plan it all finishing together and having a great sing-song and a party, but it happened so quickly, and part of that was because of the danger and the conditions, and it was really just a case of getting thrown out onto the beach, and the challenge was over, if you like. But strange.
I mean, what was the mental process as you're swimming along, and you're going up and down the waves?
Yeah.
Have you got something in your mind to keep you occupied? I'm presuming there's not a lot you can see beneath you, but
no, you can't see anything. You can see your hand. You can just about see your hand, and as you're extending forward, you can still see your fingertips, so that's fine. You can't see much else. I mean, the other guys might have thought something differently. At the beginning, it was about really trying to put your best stroke on and trying to get your best time, because we were having a great time, very confident, and all those things. But halfway through, when the conditions changed, for me it was about trying to blot out the little monster on your left hand shoulder, which is trying to scare you, and the little fella on your right hand shoulder who's trying to big you up. You've got to listen to him, because there's a lot of scary things that might spook you out of that for whatever reason. Now, if you go back to the boat, or if you touch anybody else, or if you ask for any help that involves anything that's maybe touched or thrown to you, then you're immediately disqualified, of course. So you're also petrified of letting your teammates down, and that to me was probably the overriding thought, that I can't let anybody down on this. I was scared. I wouldn't pretend I wasn't. It's very, very scared at some stages. But I knew they would have been feeling the same. And to be fair, I knew they had my back, even though I couldn't see them. I knew there was eyes. Every single pair of eyes on that boat was glued on me while I was in the water, as I was when they were in the water. So I knew really that, even though the seas were rough, I knew they had my back and they would do their very best to come and help me if I was in serious trouble. And it was a case of just trying to get your job done, and blot out all of the negative thoughts, and there are plenty. And you've just got to think, look, this is an hour of my life. You've got to work it out, and before you know it, then you get into your routine. And once you realise that, and you actually go with the swell, if you like, and you don't try and fight it, and you're all tense, then you go with it, and you get beaten around, but you're just up and down with the swell, and you just have to go with that motion, and just take all those negative thoughts out of your head if you can.
You had to work them out. So you had this first time, and obviously you had a rather strange ending. But leading on from this, what was next? You kind of got the bug, I guess, after that.
Well, sort of, yeah. I mean, rugby was still a big part of my life then, so that was definitely, rugby is quite consuming, and so that was pretty much full on. But then about 4 or 5 years after that, I had some injuries, and rugby had to more or less come to an end. And one of my lifelong friends, best buddy, Johnny, who I played rugby with forever and went to school with from a very young age. I think it might have been from the season after I stopped playing rugby. I got a nice birthday present from him, which was an entrance into the Lanzarote Ironman. And again, something completely unknown or fresh for me. We'd swam the channel, so I sort of knew how to swim, but wasn't fast. Never run a marathon before, never cycled 100 miles before. So that sort of Ironman came along then, and that was probably in about 2000. And Ironmen then were probably quite rare, and it was quite unusual. But that was just fun. And again, I thought, well, I'll give that a go. I definitely won't be on the podium, but if I can finish the Ironman, that would be something to think about. So that was a sort of the next little adventure that happened. And after the Ironman, then started getting involved in some marathon running. I was a sort of a cross country runner pre-rugby as a kid. So the running came reasonably easy for me. So then it was sort of a bit of the marathon circuit. Maybe did 4 or 5 marathons: London, Amsterdam, Berlin, and that was good. But again, injury. I mean, running's hard work, and my rugby had finished because of injury, and running was almost very similar actually. My hips were playing up, and all sorts of different problems with knees. So then, with a little bit of the biking that we did for the Ironman, got involved in some cycling. And my friend Johnny, again from school, he got me involved in this Irish cycling group, and they were going off to the Alps actually to do a 6-day alpine tour stage. It wasn't a race, but unfortunately, with the people that go, everything turns into a race because that's how cyclists are. I say unfortunately, but it was just great fun. So we did many of the big coals, many of the classics. And this was this was quite a punchy team actually. It was led by a number of the prominent cyclists in Ireland at the time. Sean Kelly is a rider that many people would know. So he headed up the whole gig, and there was about 30 of us that did this sort of 6-day stage race come tour. So that was a great experience. And then with the team that we had there together, it worked very well. Got together and they wanted to plan something for the following year, which was an attempt on something called the Mizzen to Malin Head, which is really like a Land's End John O'Groats of the UK. So Mizzen being down in southern Cork, Malin being up in the north. That's about 380 miles is the distance on that. And Kelly and his crew, they had an idea that they wanted to break some sort of record there with time and people. So they got pretty much the same team that was together the previous year. And that was a team of 25, 30 people from memory. And the attempt was to do the Mizzen to Malin in one crack and to try and have a go at a very serious time and broke the previous time that had been done. So that really was a really interesting challenge. And that one, you really had to throw yourself fully into cycling. There was no way that you could do anything else but cycle, and the speed of these guys was pretty swift to say the least. I was sort of fairly new to cycling in the years. I certainly wasn't a seasoned cyclist, but that's what we set out to do. The route was planned absolutely meticulously. They had the best people there on that to try and take every single possible meter of height elevation out. We went down the most direct route, which was pretty much major A roads all the way through. They managed to get us a police escort for the whole journey. We had a police escort for 375 miles, which was 380 miles, which means we didn't stop at any traffic lights. We got fast green access through to absolutely everything. We had a number of support vehicles front and back, which just keep us nice and pinned in. And those guys were blaring out music, throughout the whole challenge, through the middle of the night as we were going through. So it was so well organised. Up until about the day before, we weren't exactly sure whether we were going to go south to north or north to south, and that was really down to the wind, because we had the option to go both, and because we were about speed and trying to get a sharp time, that was vitally important. And as it happens, we ended up going from south to north, which we found out about 24 hours before that. And then that was really, really interesting. So the group, we met sort of lunchtime, worked our way down to the most southerly point of Ireland. And then I think from sort of 4 or 5 o'clock, again, the klaxon goes off and the peloton's flying. And it's interesting because, it's a reasonably big peloton, 25, 30 people. But the rules of engagement really were that the peloton wouldn't stop for anybody. No matter what happened, the peloton was going to go at certain speed, and if you couldn't keep up with that, then you were spat out the back, and that was the end of your challenge. If you got a mechanical, I'm afraid we can't wait for you. Got a puncher, we can't wait for you. If you got a puncher, we might try and help you fix it or throw you out a spare bike that's on some of the roofs. But then you've got to try and get back up to that peloton, which is moving super fast. So you might be hanging onto a car door, or you might be, I don't know how you get back. And a couple of people, unfortunately, did get spat out, and a couple of people got punches, mechanicals, and struggled to get back. But that was, again, that was the challenge wasn't about any one individual. It was about the team completing this. It was really interesting, and the sort of food stops, even they were almost clinically planned. That there was a whistle blown as we arrived into the stops. All the trestle tables were laid out with the necessary food for carbs, for energy, and the whole thing was laid out there for you with an army of volunteers and helpers. Whistle was blown, and you had 2 minutes to get your gig together for your food, for your hydration, for any toilet stops you might need. And then there was another whistle blown with 10 seconds to go. Unless you were back on your bike and pedaling, that was going without you. So again, you're very, very conscious about this, about the time, and about everything. So it was very, very sharp and very interesting in that regard. And, even the way the peloton ran really, that you would do 2 minutes at the front, 1 minute would be sort of top right, and then 1 minute would be top left. So every minute you're changing around your place in the grid, and you're working your way around that peloton, which made it interesting, because that way you're speaking to someone different every minute, albeit one of the 20, 25 people that you're seeing on a regular basis. But that kept it interesting. For those 2 minutes you were at the front, you were blowing very hard, because it was, you had to try and keep the speed up to just around 20 miles an hour was the average that we had to try and get to. So you're blowing super hard at the front, but then you knew in 2 minutes' time you'd have the sort of safety and the comfort of the peloton and all the benefits that might give you behind to sort of regroup. Get yourself back together again before you'd work your way up the peloton to get to the front again. So, that made it really quite interesting. And, again, even going through the night, I remember it was sort of 11:30, screaming through this Irish countryside, and music blaring, police lights, sirens going, and it was just such a buzz. I mean, your endorphins were all over the place. And, Ireland, that was sort of kicking out time for many of the pubs out there. Any time between 11 and probably 2 in the morning is kicking out the pubs. So you'd see these groups of people coming out the pubs to see this, this huge peloton go screaming past with all sorts of noise. So they'd be shouting and screaming, supporting. So it made the whole thing really quite special. And then you go into the darkness by probably not until about maybe 11 o'clock at night. And again, that was interesting, because again, at night time, screaming through the countryside, that was just a real buzz. It's something that you probably don't get to do in your life in a group like that before. So that was really, really interesting. But then by about maybe sort of 2:30, 3 o'clock, already the sun's starting to break through. And, by 3:30, you've got this shimmering really of a stunning sunrise which is coming through, and then you've sort of cracked the meat of it, and by that stage you're through to sort of 6, 7 o'clock, and you're just working your way through. And the same that you might do in any other challenges, you just really breaking it down into mini pieces. You just want to get through your next 20 miles. You want to get through your next 2 minutes at the front, and then you know you're going to have maybe 20, 25 minutes rest again within the peloton. And of course, you're very nervous of bringing the peloton down because you're cycling super close together, because you have to be. So you might be, an inch or 2 inches from someone's wheel. And, again, not being an experienced cyclist, I was very conscious that, at one mistake, I could bring this whole bloody thing down. So that was on your mind. So you certainly had to keep mentally sort of sharp and aware, and not think about the bigger picture, because the bigger picture was still quite daunting. It was just a case of just breaking it down into your time at the front. And sure enough, as we move forward, we managed to get to the most northern part of Ireland, and we managed that in 21 hours. And it was a phenomenal feat. It was an amazing challenge. It was driven by some very great people. And it was a real privilege to be part of that. And a little part of that world. Wouldn't pretend to be any part of that near the top of ability. Far from it. I was happy to be hanging on by the fingernails for much of it. But just a great experience, and one of those things that and I certainly won't be repeating that. But it was just a great experience to do, and what an opportunity to do that with some great cyclists around me.
Well, I mean, I've never had that feeling. I mean, I cycle quite a lot. I would love to experience actually being in a peloton and kind of switching in, experience being like a mass moving along past people. It sounds amazing.
It really, really was. And, you had to pinch yourself sometimes to think how quickly that journey had come around, from meeting the guys the year before that to really trying to up your mileage and doing fairly big mileage through the week and weeks to get yourself up to that sort of fitness level. But certainly on sort of race day or event day, it was quite surreal actually, because the whole experience, it was it felt sometimes like I was almost looking on at it and not part of it, because it was, in my mind, it was something that was so far from what I'd done before, and it was just such a buzz. An amazing group of people, all very, very humble, super athletes, and very welcoming. I think I was the only English guy there, but it was very, very, very welcoming, and very lucky to be a part of that. And that's been a good one.
So another fantastic story. I'm looking at the time. So usually I make the podcast about half an hour, but I'm really enjoying these. Do you want to talk about? There's one more that I'm hoping to talk about, which we sort of I was hoping to hear about one of your ski stories. Do you want to tell it on the podcast, and then I can just make it longer? It's no problem. I think it would be nice to listen to that. And
I'd hate to overdo the welcome, or overdo the boredom of this for people, but happy to discuss the ski tour, absolutely. But again, very conscious of your time and the listeners' time on that.
No, it sounds good. Let's go for it. Tell the story.
So that was then into the world of cycling, and then again, I think after that there was a couple of other cycles. There was an Adapter Tour. There was another couple of channel swims. In different relays with different people, and because with different people the experience is completely different, and they were great challenges in themselves. And then again, there was a number of different things that we and I had done in our small little group, and wanted to do something completely different. And I think that's part of the fun of these things, where it's about challenging yourself not to always do the same thing all the time. I mean, unless you're super competitive, you're actually competing at something, which I'm certainly not. I like the experience of something really raw and doing something fresh. So I have been a skier probably since maybe early 20s, as my buddy Johnny is, and another guy called Peter, again, a school buddy. So there's a common theme here that comes through some of these things. And we decided over a number of beers that we'd like to try and do a skiing challenge, and looked around for what there might be out there. And clearly there are plenty once you start to look into it. But there's one that jumped at us, which is called the Hout Route, which is a cross-country ski challenge, which really goes from Chamonix to Zermatt. Now, that's a distance of about 180 kilometres. And for that, it's about a 6-7 day ski trip from memory. Comes with some trepidation, because you really don't know what you're going to be getting. The conditions can vary on a day-by-day basis, and something that could be easy one day could be super dangerous and difficult the next day or the next month. So again, cut a long story short, we got ourselves as fit as we could, myself, Johnny and JJ from school. We went out and did a couple of training camps with our guide that we'd hooked up with, a guy called Jean Pavillard. He wasn't madly impressed with us, to be fair, because our skiing ability was average. Our fun factor was 100%, and he got the impression we weren't taking it too seriously because we were laughing and joking a lot. But for us, we were having the time of our lives. So he had to pull us up on more than a few occasions and threaten to not to go through the challenge unless we knuckled down and did it his way, which I can fully understand because there's huge safety elements involved with that. But we were never putting ourselves at risk, but we were just enjoying the challenge, and he didn't see it that way. He thought we were being a bit frivolous with it. But anyway, cut long story short, we put ourselves down 2008. Signed up, paid our money, and flew out to Geneva. Actually, it was quite strange because we flew out to Geneva in, I think it was early to mid-May, which is very late, of course. And unbelievably in Geneva, the plane only just landed because they had a massive snowstorm that came in that day, which lasted for about another 3 days. So we got ourselves up to Chamonix, and the guide said, "Look, this is too dangerous now because it's mid-May, it's getting warmer." And we've had meters of snow up here. It needs time to settle down. You can either stay in Cham or get yourselves back home and then come back in 5 days, 4 to 5 days time. So we decided we better go home because otherwise it'd just be on the lash or do something stupid in Chamonix. So we came back 4 or 5 days later, and sure enough, the things had settled down, and there'd been no fresh snow, and the snow that had been there before had sort of packed down and settled down. But again, on a serious note, we were super super lucky with that because Jean Paviat, our guide, he was strict, but he was all about health and safety. And there was another group that were going out the same day as us. That they decided to carry on with their event, which was 4 days in effect before us now, in the height of that big and fresh snow, and unfortunately 2 of their group died on their challenge with a massive avalanche that came in from one of the huts they were staying at. So I suppose in some ways we might owe Jean Paviat our lives because had he said that had been fine to go with, we might have been part of that same group. And it was really very eerie because sort of 4 days later we've skied past these avalanches where these people were lost, and there's boulders almost the size of houses, and you think there's bodies that were buried under that, and that really brought things home there of the danger really of nature and the power of nature, and again we were very very lucky to have a very good guide that put his health and safety and our health and safety first really. So this tour is it's really interesting. So what you do is you basically skin up the mountains. And you'll ski down the other side, and you have to start fairly early in the morning because the sort of mid-May, even the Alps can start to get quite warm, certainly in the afternoon. And again, with the masses of snow that's there, avalanche risk is huge. So we would start anywhere between 3 and 4 in the morning, and that was really quite surreal. So you leave these little mountain huts that you're staying in, fully head torched on, and your skin's on the bottom of your skis, and you start plodding about the mountain. And there'd just be 4 of us, 4 little lone souls in the middle of nowhere, and we wouldn't see anyone all day until we arrived into the next hut, later that afternoon. So the solace of that was just quite unbelievable. Very similar to what Oles was talking about in Greenland, a very similar type of experience, although this was sort of more mountainous. And I wouldn't say treacherous, but there were certainly areas you had to be very careful on. Some areas you got crampons on, you roped together. Some areas you got some technical climbing, although I'm not a climber. But there was parts of that. There might have been 4 or 5 parts of that week journey where had you made a mistake, that wouldn't have been good. And so you had to really focus in and give that bit your concentration. I'm not great with heights, so some of those were, they were quite nervy actually, and I'd had some sort of sleepless nights at night thinking about what the next day might bring us. And again, that was almost like the channel. You've just got to get your head around that, and you've got good people around you. You've got a very good guide with you, and you've got to deal with what comes out there. And you just try and back yourself in some of these areas where you might have a narrow ledge and you've got to get across it. You've got to back yourself to know that you can walk in a straight line, and there's no reason why you should slip or fall, and all those things, and get rid of some of those sort of negative images from your mind, which could be quite dramatic, of course. So yeah, we ended up, as I say, we'd start at sort of 3, 4 in the morning, and we'd plough ourselves up the mountain. And some of those, they might take sort of 2, 3 hours to climb up a peak, and then you ski down the other side in minutes. Obviously, you'd be taking your skins off at the top of the mountain, ski down, big heavy rucksack. Again, skins back on the bottom, and you'd work your way, meander your way up and down through these ranges of mountains up and down all day long, and then you'd arrive in these little huts that are dotted around the Alps, and they are in the absolute middle of nowhere. And again, you'd see no one around you, but you get inside the hut, and then various other people would come in. It could be climbers, it could be other skiers that have done challenges or doing other challenges. So you sort of meet up with this sort of like-minded body of people in the evening, big communal dinner, maybe a couple of glasses of wine because everyone's in good spirits. But certainly you've got to be on your toes a little bit. So you've got a 3:00 start. You can't be you can't be drinking too much. But that was so that was quite an amazing experience. And staying at some of these little huts in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they're memories that will stay with me forever, actually. And eventually, after 6 days, we could see the Matterhorn coming in the distance. And we thought, the Zermatt and the Matterhorn, that's where we're going to be finishing. And eventually, we got there. But it was there was so much that went into that challenge of, again, so much fear, but so much elation, so much teamwork, camaraderie. Again, everybody having everybody's back. I mean, there were certain parts of that where you'd only be able to go across certain glaciers one at a time because of the risk of avalanche, and the guide would be there, with his transmitter, that if anything happened, he'd be straight there to you with a shovel and all these sort of things. So there was a lot of things in your mind you had to be aware of, let alone the sort of skiing technical ability, which was, for us was fairly challenging. But again, just another great thing to be able to have done. And a really great experience to I suppose to appreciate the Alps, where you're not in a big ski resort with maybe hundreds of thousands of people around you. You really are in the middle of nowhere, and you're working your way through like little ants, a team of ants, across this mountain range of 180 kilometres, over 6 days. And again, that was a pleasure and a privilege to be with the teammates and to be part of that journey, to be honest, Josh.
Well, it's another fantastic story. It's been a pleasure to actually listen to some of these. I've seen from the email you sent me before that you've got many, many more to talk about. We can't talk about them all, I'm afraid. I really wish we could. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe talk a bit about the charity and sort of give any links that you want to leave as we bring it to a close.
Well, listen, that's kind of you. And again, the reason that most of these challenges have got going is because of the charity. So Ordinary to Extraordinary was formed in 2007. It was formed by myself, Dave Davis and Spadgy, members of Beckenham Rugby Club. And really, O2E has rugby values in its core. We're lifelong friends. And the same is in rugby. Once you've worn the colours of your club, in this case it would be O2E or it could be rugby. Once you've worn those colours, you are a member and a friend for life. There's no one there going to judge you. And O2E was really set up with two main reasons. It was really set up to make a difference to the lives of sort of terminally needy and seriously ill children. That was at our forefront. And then it was also set up to make a difference to our own lives by encouraging sport and adventure and all of the benefits that go with that. And you just sort of touched on some of the challenges. And, maybe some of those wouldn't have happened without O2E giving you the extra push and the camaraderie and friendship around you. So what might be extraordinary for one person could be ordinary for someone else. So that's the ordinary to extraordinary. It's about really trying to encourage people to get out of their comfort zones, to get involved in something. And quite often, as most of these challenges are, the hardest thing actually you will ever do is enter that competition or commit yourself to that race or to whatever that challenge you might want to do. You will find lifelong friends with O2E. You will find inspiring people. You'll find people from all walks of life. There will be no judgment. O2E is about doing your best, and it's about fundraising for those charities and about getting out of your comfort zone and making something of your life that you might not have done without that. So the links on that, we would love any of your listeners to come and join O2E. I would love to be able to the opportunity to talk about O2E more to them individually or again on a separate podcast, because it's something that's massively close to my heart and a big part of my life and my friends' lives. www.o2e.org is the site. Slatts at o2e.com. You'll be able to get me on, and I'll be delighted to ask and answer any questions on O2E. And I will say that in the time that we've been going now, this is our 14th year. There's been so many challenges that have been done worldwide by so many great people. And, we've now, I think in the last challenge we've just completed in January, we've now raised £2.7 million for some unbelievable children's charities that really have benefited from the work that O2E has done. And again, it's a privilege and honour to be part of that charity. And we'd love more people to be involved with us, Josh.
I mean, it's really interesting to me, talking to you and Ollie, in the types of challenges you do, it sort of rings very true with what you're saying. You're trying different things and pushing your comfort zone. Ollie's had a cycling background, but was still willing to try lots of different things, go and do a ski, go and do something else. and it sounds like an amazing part of what the charity is about.
But life is about that, isn't it? I mean, I think, it's a little bit corny, but you're on this planet once. And I think, you want to try and experience as much as you possibly can in all of the events that I've done. And I've done nothing more than many others. So, let's be clear about that. There's so many great people that have done many more things than me with O2E and challenges. But it's really about testing yourself. It's about trying new experiences. I'm never going to win any of the events that I try to enter. That's never going to happen. But that doesn't stop you doing it, does it? You're doing it there for the experience. I love to me, it's all about the journey that we take together. And you do that together as a team. From that very first time where you shake hands or you have a beer and you say, right, this is now, we're committed to this. Then there's your contract signed over a glass of beer. You then get your training program together over the next days, weeks, month, however long that challenge might be ahead. And then you start to work on those training programs together. And the actual event itself, I mean, that's just one small part of that. That destination is great because that's where, that's the finish line. But the journey is everything, Josh. It really is. And it's a journey with your friends, with your like-minded people. And they might not be friends when you first started, but they'll be lifelong friends by the time you finish. And, it's not about winning. It's really not. It's about experiencing as many different things you can in life. While you're able, God forbid, something else happen. You might not be able to do that next year, the year after, in 5-10 years' time. None of us have the right to be here at 75 years of age or 80 years of age, fully healthy. Again, there's many great people that go too early, and it's about experiencing everything you can while you can, really, Josh.
So it's really nice to hear, and it is, it comes through the stories and your love of the charity. It's just the passion you hear in your voice. It's just lovely to listen to, really. I'm going to bring the podcast to a close. I'm actually thinking that we might have to do a special about O2E. We might have to do, maybe bring on a few of the people that have done adventures in different places, and we have like a longer episode, and we talk to a few people. How does that sound?
I'll tell you, Josh, you could do 20 podcasts on O2E. There are so many great people that have done things for O2E, and they're not necessarily all headline events. They're not necessarily going to the other ends of the world and doing things. For some people, a 5K run for some of the people we have at O2E is extraordinary. So not everyone's gifted in ways on the sporting front or the adventure front. And that's what, to me, makes the charity so special, because I consider those people to be the best athletes I've ever seen, because they've done the very best they can with themselves. And they really have pushed themselves beyond anything that they might have thought themselves possible. Just really to wrap up with this, a challenge we've just done in January, and we got 275 people involved in this, and it was a challenge originally to circumnavigate the world on a bicycle. We were all going to do 400 miles each through the month. We ended up getting 275 people. It was going to originally be about 60 or 70. We ended up collectively doing 123,000 miles, so nearly 5 times around the globe. We had all sorts of people doing this. And in the end, we had people that walked, we had people that run, we had people that rode. We had one guy that was climbing Stairmasters. I mean, it was just everybody getting involved at their own level of what they could do. We had young Connor, 10 years of age, who cycled 500 miles outdoors in the month of January. Just unbelievable. We had, Mr. and Mrs. Howard, 76 and 78 years of age, did 400 miles on an indoor bicycle through the month. We had Howard, a good friend of mine from the rugby club, 73 years of age, did 400 miles outdoors on a Brompton in January, in freezing cold, wet January. And these are people that inspire me, Josh, because when I look at what these people are doing, you can't help but be inspired and want to be part of their team and want to go along with everything that they choose to do, and we try and encourage them to do. So I would love to do an O2E podcast and get some of the real heroes of O2E involved in that, because there are many, and it's a great charity, and I would love some of your listeners to maybe come and join us and join us on next year's January challenge, because I've got ideas to make that massive. I would love to make that absolutely huge. And as I said, we raised £130,000 in January, and it's a huge sum of money that we're now passing directly on to our children's charities, which in these times makes such a great difference to them, and the hard times that they've had. But as well as that, we've all helped each other on this. January has been a very difficult month. COVID's been a very difficult time. The mental awareness and the mental health that's come out of this has been huge. To have a team of 275 people around you that you're buzzing through on a daily basis, and you're chatting, you're interacting, you're congratulating, you're learning their story. For many people, that's been a saviour for January, and a saviour of getting out of this COVID and the mental health that some of us have struggled with. And there's nothing to be ashamed about that. It's been a very challenging time for many people. And again, something hugely privileged to be proud to be part of that challenge. And again, that's something that's going to run and run, Josh.
No, it sounds wonderful, and it's been a pleasure to speak to you. It really has. I was speaking to you before. It was about being able to talk about the charity. I hope I've given you a platform to talk about some of your ventures, and you've managed to talk a bit about them, and maybe we'll do something in future together. It sounds like a good
I
idea.
would be honoured if you come and join us on a challenge, and then you can see yourself, deep down, the quality of people that will be around you, and the lifelong friends that you will make. And it's not about anyone's sporting ability. That's the furthest thing from O2E. It really is. The fact that we go out there and do our best, that's a good thing. There's nothing to be ashamed about going to do your best, and that's something I'd aspire everyone to do. But it's really about having those quality people around you, on your back, in your team, with you, living that journey. And it is the journey and not the destination that's important.
Thank you very much. It's been good to speak to you.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate your time. Thank you.